For half a century, making computers faster meant doing one specific thing: shrinking transistors. And the way we did that was by shining light through microscopic stencils to carve smaller and smaller patterns onto silicon. Back in 1965, Gordon Moore noticed a pattern. Engineers were doubling the number of transistors on a chip every 2 years. This relentless shrinking became known as Moore's Law, and it set the heartbeat for the entire tech industry. But around 2015, that shrinking process hit a physical wall. The industry was using deep ultraviolet light with a wavelength of 193 nanometers. As the gaps in those stencils got narrower, the light waves themselves were literally too wide to fit through cleanly. Instead of printing a sharp line, the light diffracts and blurs into a mess. The theoretical fix was to use a much smaller wavelength. If you switch to extreme ultraviolet, or EUV light, the wavelength drops to just 13.5 nanometers. That tiny, high-frequency wave slips right through the same narrow gap, printing a perfectly crisp pattern on the other side. There was just one massive problem. EUV light doesn't exist naturally on Earth, and because it packs so much energy, it is instantly absorbed by almost all matter. If you try to shine it through regular air, or even the standard glass lenses we've always used to focus light, the material simply absorbs the photons. The light vanishes. Because of that extreme absorption, Moore's Law was trapped. To keep making smaller, faster chips, engineers had to throw out decades of established optics and completely reinvent how a manufacturing machine actually works. Since a glass lens would absorb the EUV light, the first major workaround was to replace lenses with a series of specialized curved mirrors. And to stop the air from absorbing the light, the entire process had to take place inside a total vacuum. But that fix created a new trap. Because EUV wavelengths are so incredibly small, even microscopic imperfections on a standard mirror act like giant mountains. The short waves hit those bumps and bounce off wildly, completely ruining the focus. To solve this, the mirrors had to be polished to atomic smoothness. If you scaled one of these new mirrors up to the size of Germany, the single largest bump across the entire country would be no taller than 1 millimeter. Yet even the smoothest mirrors in the universe still absorb a little bit of light. By the time the EUV beam bounces off the sequence of 6 mirrors needed to focus the image, roughly 96% of your original photons are lost. With nearly all the light disappearing in the mirror maze, engineers faced a brutal reality. The only way to ensure enough photons reach the silicon wafer at the end was to build an unimaginably bright artificial sun at the very beginning. To generate that intense EUV light, the designers settled on a highly specific reaction: vaporizing extremely pure molten tin into a glowing plasma. Executing that in a machine is mechanically absurd. You have to shoot a microscopic droplet of molten tin mid-air with a high-powered laser. The exact timing required is like trying to hit a golf ball straight into a hole from 200 meters away and never missing once. And you don't just do it once. To generate a continuous, powerful beam of light, that tiny tin droplet has to be perfectly struck by the laser 50,000 times every single second. Hitting a round droplet wasn't efficient enough, so they split the laser strike into 2 steps. First, a weak pre-pulse hits the droplet to flatten it into a microscopic pancake, increasing its surface area. Then, an instant later, the main laser pulse slams into it, vaporizing the tin into a plasma, burning it over 220,000 degrees Celsius. That violent 2-step reaction produces a brilliant flash of EZ radiation. By chaining together 50,000 of these microscopic supernovas every second, the machine finally produced a light source intense enough to survive the punishing journey through the mirror maze. Detonating molten metal creates an immediate physical consequence. The explosion blasts out a storm of microscopic metallic shrapnel. Left unchecked, that tin debris would instantly coat the first hypersmooth mirror, rendering the whole system useless. To protect the optics, the vacuum chamber is pumped with a meticulously calculated flow of hydrogen gas. The hydrogen slows the tin particles down and binds with them to form a chemical compound that can be safely vacuumed out. Balancing that gas flow is incredibly delicate. To clear out the extreme heat from the plasma without absorbing the precious EUV light itself, the hydrogen has to be flushed through the chamber at a hurricane speed of 360 kilometers per hour. When you put all the pieces together, you have a 220,000-degree plasma exploding 50,000 times a second inside a hydrogen hurricane, right next to the smoothest mirrors ever made. Managing those exact conflicting forces is what finally yielded a stable, usable EUV beam. All of these engineering workarounds are housed inside the ASML High-NA EUV machine. It's a $350 million behemoth constructed in ultra-strict cleanrooms to control the chaotic forces harnessed inside. Parts of this machine are whipping around at accelerations over 20 Gs, more than 5 times the force a Formula One driver experiences. Yet, while operating with that extreme physical violence, it manages to overlay individual layers of a microchip with a maximum margin of error of just 5 silicon atoms. Today, there is only one company in the world that can build this. This exact machine design is the singular reason why modern flagship smartphones, advanced computing infrastructure, and complex AI processors can physically exist. We often think of technological progress as a smooth, natural timeline, but the reality is that progress isn't inevitable at all. It requires forcing an outcome against the physical limits of the universe, simply because unreasonable engineers refuse to take impossible for an answer.